Okay, so this story is one I never thought I'd be telling out loud, but it's just too much of a wild ride not to share. It's one of those family moments that you wish didn't happen, but are forever stuck with. Okay? And trust me, I'm still reeling from it. So grab a seat because this is going to be a long one, and it's definitely not your average wedding story. Let's start from the beginning. You know when someone is planning their wedding, they go a little, well, crazy with all the details? And when I say crazy, I mean the whole shebang, every table centerpiece, every guest, every single song on the playlist. For my sister, this wedding was more than just a ceremony. 'Twas her dream coming true. And as her sister, I was 100% ready to help her make that dream happen. Everything was going great at first. She was as happy as could be, and we were talking about all the little things, flowers, the cake, what time to take the photos. But when it came to the dresses, that's when things got tricky. I had always thought the dress was the one thing that would bring us closer together in all the madness. I mean, how could something as simple as a dress cause so much drama? But there it was, right in front of me, the dress that was supposed to bring us closer. The one thing she had to have me wear to match her. And I'm telling you, it was just wrong. It wasn't just the fact that it was tight, uncomfortable, and had all these sparkles. It was like she wanted me to live out her fantasy while I was literally suffocating in this shiny prison of a dress. She had this look on her face when she showed it to me like she had just discovered the secret to happiness. And who was I to ruin her moment? So I took it in, trying to smile through it, but everything in me was screaming no. The dress didn't fit right, the fabric felt stiff, and the color. Oh my God, it was all wrong. But I stood there in the fitting room, trying not to be the buzzkill. I took a deep breath and tried it on. Honestly, I was hoping it would feel better on me, but it was worse. I looked like I was drowning. In sequins. She was all smiles, and I couldn't help but want to make her day. She pulled me to the mirror, and for a moment she just stared at me. I saw the excitement in her eyes, like this was the moment we'd been waiting for our whole lives. And that's when it hit me. She wanted us to look identical. It's to be the perfect match. The idea seems so romantic, right? But here I was dying in this dress that I didn't even feel like myself in. I told her, sis, I love you, but I can't wear this. It's not me. And that was when the shift happened. The look on her face was one of pure disappointment. She didn't yell, didn't scream, but I could see the hurt in her eyes. She asked, almost pleading, but why? I want it to be perfect. Don't you want it to be perfect? I tried to explain it to her, but the more I talked, the more she pulled away. She was so hurt, and I felt awful. But at the same time, there was no way I was going to wear that dress. I couldn't put myself through that. That's where things really started to take a turn. I thought we'd move past it, that we could be adults and work through it. But every time we talked about it, there was this heavy air between us. I could tell it was bothering her more than she let on. She tried to hide it, of course, but I knew, and I hated that I felt like I was letting her down. Okay? Now fast forward to the wedding day. Everything was supposed to be perfect, right? But no, that tension. It was still there. It was like this cloud hanging over us, and I could feel it. As I watched her walk down the aisle, the pride I had in my sister was mixed with this feeling of dread. I was watching her live out her dream, and all I could think was, did I ruin it? Did my decision just break everything? At the reception, I tried to push it all aside, tried to just enjoy the moment. She was finally getting the wedding she had always wanted. But the feeling of discomfort was suffocating. I kept glancing over at her, and she seemed, well, distant. Then it happened. She pulled me aside in the middle of everything. We were at the reception, music playing, people laughing, but her face was stone cold. She was like a different person. She looked at me and said, "We need to talk." And I thought to myself, this is it. This is where it all comes crashing down. I followed her to a quieter part of the venue, away from all the guests, away from the celebration. And before I could say anything, she just let loose. She looked at me with eyes full of tears and anger, saying, "You ruined my day. You embarrassed me. You could have made it perfect, but you chose to be difficult. I had no idea where this was coming from, but the hurt in her voice hit me like a ton of bricks. And then she said, "Why couldn't you just wear the damn dress?" Now, here's the part I didn't expect. I didn't see it coming at all. Smack! She slapped me across the face. And it wasn't just a little tap. This was a full-out slap. In front of everyone. I felt it ring through my entire body. My cheek burned with the sting, and I stood there in shock. I couldn't even process what had just happened. I was frozen. Everything around me felt like it was moving in slow motion. The music from the reception faded into the background. I could feel everyone's eyes on me. The room went completely silent. Everyone was waiting for me to react. All I could do was stand there, completely stunned. She didn't apologize. She didn't even seem sorry. She just stood there, arms crossed, waiting for me to do something, anything. But all I could think was, why did it have to come to this? Why was she willing to let this day be ruined over a dress? And I did it. I walked away, right in front of her, in front of everyone. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I wasn't about to apologize for standing up for myself. I wasn't going to beg for forgiveness when I hadn't done anything wrong. But let me tell you, walking away was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I didn't want to hurt her, but I couldn't keep pretending. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. But the guilt. It ate me, alive. The second I walked out of that room, I felt like I'd just torn our relationship apart. It didn't end there, though. The silence after that moment was deafening. Days passed and we didn't talk. Not one word. She avoided me and I avoided her. Every time I saw her, I felt this knot in my stomach. I kept telling myself I had done the right thing, but my heart felt like it was breaking into pieces. And then, after what seemed like a lifetime of silence, we finally talked. But let me tell you, that conversation was not easy. It was the hardest talk I've ever had with her. She'll let me have it. She told me how I had shattered her dream of the perfect wedding, how she couldn't believe I'd let her down like that. And let me tell you, it hurt. It hurt more than anything else, knowing that I had disappointed her so deeply. But I told her the truth. I told her that I loved her, but I couldn't wear something that didn't feel like me. I couldn't pretend to be someone else, even for her. And honestly, I think that's when she realized something important. When we sat down to talk, it wasn't just about the dress anymore. It was about everything, the things we never said, the emotions we kept hidden for so long. We both realized that our relationship had become something it wasn't supposed to be. We were both trying so hard to make the other happy that we were, forgetting what made us happy in the first place. I tried to explain to her that I wasn't rejecting her dream. I was rejecting the idea that I had to change who I was to make it fit. She looked at me for what felt like hours before she said anything. I could see the frustration in her eyes, but also the hurt. "You don't get it," she said. "I needed you. I needed you to be there for me in the way I envisioned." Wasn't just about the dress. It was about the symbolism. That dress was a part of my dream. I wanted us to be the same, to have this perfect moment. And you ruined it. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't before. It wasn't just about the dress for her. It wasn't even about the wedding. It was about validation. She wanted to feel like she wasn't alone in this. She wanted to feel like she had someone who was fully on her side, someone who would sacrifice anything for her happiness. But what I hadn't realized was that I wasn't her puppet. I wasn't just a piece in her perfect picture. I was her sister, someone who had their own boundaries, their own voice, and their own way of doing things. I told her, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I hurt you. But you have to understand that I can't be someone I'm not. You know how important my comfort is to me, and I wasn't going to let this moment define me in a way that wasn't true to who I am." It was quiet for a long time after that. There was a stillness in the air. like the calm before a storm. But then, finally, she spoke again, softer this time, her voice trembling. "I never thought I'd be so angry with you," she admitted. "I never thought I could hate you for not doing something so simple. But I realize now that I was wrong. I was angry at the wrong thing. It wasn't the dress. It was the fact that I was trying to make you fit into my world instead of understanding yours. It hit me like a ton of bricks. All this time, I had been so focused on standing my ground, but I never took a second to really see what was happening in her heart. And she was doing the same thing, only she was afraid of losing control, of losing the perfect vision she had been so desperately trying to make real. This wasn't just about me refusing to wear the dress. This was about us both trying to force each other into a role that wasn't ours to play. I paused and let her words sink in. This wasn't just about my boundaries. It was about the way our love for each other was so deep that it had been suffocating us. She was looking for reassurance, for confirmation that she wasn't alone in this, and I wasn't giving it to her, not the way she needed it. I knew then that I needed to let go of the pride I had been holding on to. It wasn't about winning this argument, it was about us healing. And maybe the first step was admitting how much this was hurting us both. So I said, "You're right. I wasn't there in the way you needed me to be. And I can't change what happened, but I can be here now. I want to be a part of your life, not just your wedding day. You don't have to do this alone." There was a long silence after that. A silence that spoke volumes. And then she did something that shocked me. She reached out and she hugged me. Kay, like really hugged me. The kind of hug that told you everything you needed to know without saying a word. She pulled away, wiping her eyes, and said, "I needed you more than I realized. I'm sorry for the way I handled it. I shouldn't have put you through that." After that, things started to shift. The tension between us slowly melted away. We didn't talk about the dress anymore, but we talked about everything else. We were able to be real with each other in a way we hadn't been in a long time. I realized how much I needed her too. And as much as I thought I was standing up for myself, it was also about realizing how important it was to stand with her. I wasn't just rejecting the dress. I was rejecting the idea that I had to be someone else in order to make her happy. And you know what? A few weeks later, we ended up laughing about the whole thing. Like, really laughing. It felt good, too. Finally let go of the bitterness and just be together as sisters again. We even talked about how we could have handled things differently. And I think that conversation was more important than any dress or wedding day moment ever could be. She thanked me for sticking to my guns, for being me even when it caused friction. And I think she finally understood that she didn't need me to wear the same dress to be part of her perfect day. She just needed me to be there, show up and support her the way I know how to. And that, in itself, was the most powerful thing we could have done for each other. Over time, our relationship healed. We both grew from it. And honestly, I think we became closer than we had ever been before. Sometimes it takes a blow-up to get the real conversation going. And maybe, just maybe, that slap wasn't about the dress at all. It was about us both figuring out what it really meant to be sisters. It wasn't just about a wedding or a dress. It was about us understanding that love doesn't always look the way we imagine it. Love is messy. It's painful sometimes. It's ugly. But in the end, love is about accepting each other exactly as we are, imperfections and all. And I learned that it's okay to fight for your boundaries, but it's also okay to fight for understanding. It's okay to need each other. And now, when we look back on that day, we don't see the slap or the hurt. We see a turning point in our relationship. A point where we learned what it really means to love, forgive, and stand by each other. And while the wedding wasn't the fairy tale we thought it would be, it was real. And sometimes, that's the best thing you can ask for. As the days went by, things started to feel normal again. But even though everything seemed to be returning to normal, I couldn't shake off the weight of what had happened. It wasn't just the slap or the dress or the anger. It was the realization that our relationship had been strained for so long without us even knowing. We had both been so caught up in our own worlds that we forgot to see each other. We forgot to be there for one another in the way we really needed. We didn't talk much about the incident at first. In fact, we barely mentioned it at all. But that didn't mean the scars weren't there. Every time we spoke, there was a tension, subtle but still lingering. It was like the wound wasn't fully healed yet, and there were days when it felt like we were strangers again. Like the rift between us was so deep it would never completely mend. But then one day, out of the blue, she called me. I picked up the phone, and before I could say anything, she just said, "I've been thinking about everything, and I know I hurt you." I can't keep pretending like that didn't happen. She was quieter than usual, and I could tell she was still processing everything. But I also knew in that moment that we were finally going to have the conversation that mattered. I let her talk. She said I was so caught up in what I thought was perfect that I forgot to see you. You've always been there for me, and I wasn't there for you when it mattered. I let my own fears get in the way of our relationship. I wanted everything to be perfect. But I was too scared to admit that I was losing you in the process. And hearing her say that, hearing her admit her fear of losing me, was like a floodgate opening. Everything I'd been holding in, every ounce of hurt, confusion, and even anger came rushing out. But it wasn't as angry as it could have been. It was more like the hurt that you feel when you realize the person you love was never the enemy. They were just as lost as you were. I told her, "I've always been there for you, but I couldn't be there for you the way you wanted me to be." I was trying so hard to stand my ground, trying to prove something to myself. But I never stopped to think about what you needed from me. I guess I was so scared of losing myself in this perfect image that I didn't see that I was pushing you away too. And I'm sorry for that. I should have been better. She didn't say much after that. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and for a second, I thought maybe we weren't going to get past this after all. But then, in the softest voice, she said, "I don't want to lose you. I don't want this to be the end of us. I want us to be real with each other, even when it's hard." And right then, I knew we would be okay. We weren't out of the woods yet, not by a long shot, but that phone call. It was a turning point. It was a promise that we weren't going to let our relationship fall apart. We were both so committed to fixing it, to making sure we were both seen, heard, and understood. And little by little, we started the process of healing. It wasn't easy. There were still moments where the silence between us would creep in. Moments when I'd catch her looking at me in that way she used to, almost like she was waiting for me to mess up. And I would feel that old fear creeping in, the fear that I wasn't good enough, that maybe we weren't going to make it through. But I fought against that fear. We both did. And you know what happened? We started to rebuild. We started to talk. About everything. Not just the wedding or the dress, but about our lives, our fears, our dreams. The things that made us tick and the things that broke us. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, of course. There were still those moments where we'd fight, where we'd disagree, but each time we'd come back to the same place, understanding. We began to see each other for who we really weren't, the idealized versions of ourselves we thought the other person needed. We began to forgive ourselves for the mistakes we made and let go of the guilt that had been holding us hostage. And it was through all of this, through the pain, the tears, the rawness of the situation, that we found a deeper kind of love. Not a perfect love, not an easy love, but a real love. A love that wasn't about pretending to be something we weren't, a love that wasn't about wearing the same dress or meeting some societal expectation of what a sister relationship was supposed to look like. No, this love was messy. It was complicated, and it was ours. As the weeks went on, things started to shift. The tension started to melt away, and the distance we had both felt began to shrink. We were no longer two strangers orbiting around each other. We were sisters again, really sisters. And you know what? We ended up laughing about the whole dress situation. We laughed about how ridiculous it all seemed in the grand scheme of things. But what I learned in the end wasn't about the dress or the slap or even the wedding. It was about the lessons we learned through the pain. It was about the ways in which we both had to grow. The ways in which we both had to face our own demons in order to understand each other. And through that, we found a new kind of connection. One that was stronger, deeper, and more authentic than anything we could have imagined. It wasn't about perfection, it was about acceptance. It was about being real, even when it hurt. And that's the kind of love that lasts. The kind of love that isn't afraid to get messy, because it knows that after the storm, the sun always shines again. Life after the wedding was a series of small steps forward and some steps backward, but it was all part of the process. The healing didn't happen overnight, and we both learned that the hard way. There were days when we were fine laughing, talking, joking like nothing ever happened. But then there were the days where one little thing would trigger that old tension, a comment here, a silence there, and I could feel that familiar unease creep back in. But this time, it was different. We weren't just pretending everything was okay. We were learning how to confront it together. I remember one night, a few months after everything went down, we were sitting on the couch, scrolling through photos from the wedding. It was one of those quiet moments where the weight of everything finally hit us. We both stared at the pictures. Her walking down the aisle at the beautiful day on, something shifted. There was no bitterness anymore. We weren't looking at the photos through the lens of the conflict. We weren't stuck on the past. We were looking at the pictures and seeing the love, the laughter, and the joy. She looked at me and said, "You know, I kept thinking about that moment when I slapped you. And I kept thinking, why did I let my emotions get so out of control?" And she said it in such a soft voice, almost like she was saying it to herself as much as she was saying it to me. I could tell it had haunted her. And in that moment, I realized how much it had haunted me too. I looked at her and just shrugged. "Sis, I've thought about that moment 1,000 times. But I think we're both learning that it's not about the slap. It's about how we come back from it. We both messed up. That's okay." She smiled a little. And I could see that she was starting to understand what I had known all along, that the pain had been temporary. But the lessons, the growth that was lasting. That night, we talked for hours. We unpacked everything: the wedding, the tension, the fear of losing each other, and everything we had both been holding on to. We realized that our whole lives we had been so afraid of letting each other down, that we hadn't given ourselves the space to be human, to make mistakes, to learn from them. And once we both let go of that fear of being perfect, things started to get easier. We started to love each other, not based on the image of perfection, but based on the raw, unfiltered truth of who we were. It wasn't just about forgiving each other. It was about forgiving ourselves too. It was about realizing that love doesn't require perfection, that it doesn't mean never making mistakes. Love means being there for each other no matter what, even when things get messy, even when it hurts. And sometimes it takes a storm to clear the air, to make everything real. And that's exactly what happened with us. I know now that what we went through didn't break us, it changed us. It's made us stronger. It's taught us how to stand up for ourselves without tearing each other down. It taught us that love is about letting go of the expectations, the judgments, and just being there for each other. Real love is messy, unpredictable, and often painful, resilient, and worth fighting for. Even now, when I look back on everything, on that slap, on the dress, on all the drama, I don't feel anger anymore. I don't feel resentment. What I feel is gratitude. Because that moment, as painful as it was, gave us the opportunity to finally see each other for who we truly were. It gave us the chance to strip away the perfect images we had built up in our minds about what our relationship should look like. And in doing so, it created a deeper bond than we could have ever imagined. And even though there are days when I still think about the past, I don't dwell on it. I don't let it define me or her. What defines us now is the way we've learned to love imperfectly, the way we've learned to be there for each other in the mess, in the chaos, in the moments that don't fit the fairy tale narrative we might have. once imagined. Because those moments, they're real. And that's the kind of love that lasts. One of the most beautiful things about healing is realizing that we don't need to be perfect. We don't need to be the sisters who wear matching dresses or follow a script to make our relationship work. We just need to love. And that's exactly what we've been doing. We've been loving each other in a way that's real, raw, and beautiful. And that's enough. Now, when I look at her, I don't see the sister who slapped me at her wedding. I see the sister who stood by my side through the most difficult times. It's the one who taught me what it means to forgive, to grow, and to love unapologetically. She's not perfect. I'm not perfect. But together, we're perfect for each other. Things kept moving forward slowly but surely. It wasn't always easy, though. There were days when the pain from the past would creep up on us, when we'd remember that slap or the tension from the wedding day. But what changed was how we dealt with it. We stopped avoiding the hard conversations. We started facing them head on, even when it was uncomfortable, even when it was painful. There was this one night, a few months after the wedding, when I was sitting on the porch of our house. It was late, the kind of night where everything feels quieter, almost like the world is giving you space to think. She came out and sat next to me. She didn't say anything at first, just sat there with her thoughts. And I could feel the unspoken weight between us. But this time, I didn't feel the anger or the sadness. I felt something different, something lighter, something healing. She looked at me, and in that moment, I could see her vulnerability. It was like she wasn't the perfect bride anymore, or the girl who had this idea of what her wedding day should look like. She was just her, just my sister. I wasn't the perfect, untouchable sister either. I wasn't trying to protect myself from the hurt anymore. We were just two people sitting side by side, trying to understand each other. She turned to me and said, I never thought I could forgive myself for how I treated you that day. I kept thinking that I had failed you, that I had ruined everything. But when I think about it now, I see that it wasn't the slap. That hurt the most. It was the way I pushed you away when I needed you the most. I've been carrying that guilt, and it's been eating me up inside. I don't know how to make it right. But I'm sorry for making you feel like you were the one who had to change. And in that moment, something shifted between us. It wasn't just the apology that mattered, it was the raw honesty in her voice. She wasn't asking me to forgive her right away. She was just opening up. That's all I ever really needed from her. I didn't need perfection. I just needed her to see me, to hear me, and to understand that I was doing my best to... I took a deep breath, feeling like the weight on my chest was finally starting to lift. Sis, I don't need an apology. I needed you to see me. I needed you to understand why I did what I did. And now I get it. We both messed up. But we're here now, and that's all that matters. We sat in silence for a while, just taking it all in. I realized in that moment that we were no longer the same people we were when the wedding day started. We had both gone through this intense, painful process of learning about each other, learning about ourselves, and learning what it truly meant to love each other not perfectly, but deeply. Over time, we started to laugh about the whole situation. Not in a mocking way, but in the way that you laugh at something you can finally let go of. We started to talk about all the little things we'd missed over the years, like when we were kids. And I'd always steal her clothes, or when she'd prank me just to see me freak out. Those moments, the ones that had nothing to do with weddings or expectations, felt like the things that mattered most. And honestly, we both realized how much we needed those moments. Those were the real memories, the ones that weren't tainted by drama or stress. The ones where we were just us. But even after everything, I knew that we weren't done growing. There were still lessons to be learned. I had to learn how to be more open with my emotions, how to express my feelings without fear of judgment. She had to learn how to ask for help, how to trust others with her vulnerabilities. We both had to learn that love isn't just about the good times, it's about sticking through the tough ones, even when you feel like you might not make it out on the other side. It was about giving each other the space to be human. It's the kind of love where mistakes don't define you, but rather they shape who you become. And that, in itself, was the lesson we needed to learn the most. It wasn't the wedding or the dress or the slap that would define us, which was how we came back from it. How we chose to forgive and to keep fighting for each other, no matter how hard it got. One day she turned to me with a smile and said, "You know, I think we've been through the hardest part of our relationship. If we can survive this, we can survive anything." And I couldn't help but agree. She was right. What we had been through, the emotional roller coaster, the ups and downs, had made us stronger. And I think we both realized that we were no longer the same people who started this journey. We were better together. As time went on, the tension we once felt became a distant memory. We didn't just forgive each other, we grew from it. Every time we spoke, every time we laughed, every time we shared a moment, we were rewriting our story. Story that wasn't about perfection, but about survival, about resilience, about love. And as much as I hated to admit it, the slap was just the beginning of something much bigger than we could have ever imagined. It was a wake-up call. A reminder that sometimes, in order to move forward, you have to face the mess. And in doing so, you find a love that is real and tamed, imperfect, but undeniably strong. As months passed, we began to heal in ways I hadn't anticipated. We started to spend more time together, just the two of us, doing things we hadn't done in years. It was like we were rediscovering who we were, both as individuals and as sisters. We'd go for coffee, talk about life, laugh at old memories, and sometimes even sit in comfortable silence. There was no pressure, no expectations. It was just about being there for each other. And for the first time in a long time, it felt real. I think the hardest part was accepting that we had both played a role in the rift. In the beginning, I was angry, upset, and hurt, and I couldn't understand why she had acted the way she did. But as we started talking, as we really started to communicate, I realized that she wasn't just angry at me. She was angry at herself too. She had this idealized version of what the wedding day should look like, and when things didn't go as planned, it broke her. It wasn't about the dress. It was about the weight of perfection and how it had consumed her. I hadn't seen that at first. All I saw was a sister who was demanding something from me. But in truth, she was just seeking validation that she wasn't alone in this. And I had been too caught up in my own hurt to see it. It took me a while to forgive her for slapping me, honestly. I know it sounds petty, but I kept replaying that moment in my mind. The slap wasn't just physical, it was emotional. It felt like a betrayal of everything I thought we stood for. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this was the lesson. It wasn't about the physical act, it was about how we handled it afterward. The slap itself was a fleeting moment, but our ability to grow from it, to face it head on, that was what truly mattered. And over time, I started to let go of the bitterness. I started to understand that we were both just humans, two sisters, trying to navigate this messy, chaotic life. One day I was sitting with her and we were reminiscing about our childhood. She turned to me and said, "You know, I've always looked up to you. I know it didn't seem like it at the time, but I always admired you. You were so confident, so sure of who you were. And now I see that you've always had a strength that I never realized, and I didn't know what to say at first. It took me off guard. All I could do was shake my head and say, 'Sis, I've always been scared too. I've always been scared that I'm not enough, that I'd fail at being the sister you needed.' I just hid it better." We sat there for a long time, letting those words sink in. And in that moment, I understood. It wasn't about us fighting for perfection or trying to be the perfect family. It was about honesty, about accepting that we were both flawed but still capable of loving each other through it. And that, to me, was worth more than any dress or wedding day. From that point on, we started building something different. It wasn't perfect, not by any means. There were still moments when we'd clash, when the old wounds would bubble to the surface. But we weren't afraid to talk about it anymore. We didn't shy away from our feelings, no matter how messy or uncomfortable they were. It was like we had this new language between USA language that was based on truth. It's truth about our fears, our mistakes, our dreams, and our pain. And that truth brought us closer together. Over the next few years, we went through some of the hardest and happiest times of our lives. We celebrated milestones, grieved losses, and supported each other through the toughest challenges. And through it all, we learned something that I think changed both of us. Love isn't about pretending everything is okay when it's not. Love isn't about holding on to expectations. Love is about showing up for each other, even when things fall apart. It's about fighting for each other, even when it feels like you're fighting against each other. And sometimes love is about standing in the mess and saying, I'm still here, okay? I'm still with you. And you know what? I think we both realized that the slap, the dress, the wedding was just the beginning. The real story came after that. It came in the quiet moments, in the conversations where we learned how to truly listen to each other. It came when we chose to forgive, not just with our words, but with our actions. And that, to me, was the most beautiful thing that came out of all the chaos. Not the wedding, not the dress, but the way we learned to love again, and the way we learned to love each other, not just as sisters, but as people who had grown. Looking back, I can honestly say that the hardest moments in our relationship were the ones that taught us the most. The moments when we didn't have it all figured out, when we were at our lowest, when everything felt like it was falling apart. Those were the moments that shaped us into who we are today. And those moments, those are the ones that matter the most, because in the end, it's not about the wedding day, the dress, or the conflict. It's about what we do after that. It's about how we choose to rise together, stronger and more whole than we were before. So here we are years later, looking back at that wedding and laughing about it. Not because it was funny, but because we've come so far from that. We've learned so much. And we've learned that we don't need a perfect story. We just need our story. And that's enough. As time passed, I began to see the real strength that had come out of everything we had been through. It wasn't just the wedding day or the fight that defined us anymore. It was everything after that. The way we came together, how we rebuilt something that was broken, how we learned to trust each other again. And trust me, trust is a huge thing. You don't just get that back overnight. It takes time, patience, and a whole lot of healing. There were days when I would think back to that slap. I won't lie. There were times when it felt like it had happened only yesterday. But every time I thought about it, I also remembered how we got through it. I remembered how we talked about it, how we faced the pain head on, and how, little by little, we stopped letting that moment define us. It was just a moment, a painful one, yes, but a moment in a much bigger picture. It was a few months after the wedding that we had a conversation that I'll never forget. We were sitting at a coffee shop just talking about life, the wedding, and everything that had happened. My sister had this smile on her face, a real one, the kind that comes from understanding. She looked at me and said, I've learned something. I used to think that perfection was the key to happiness. But now I know that imperfection is what makes us real. It's what makes us human. I spent so much of my life trying to make everything perfect that I almost lost the best thing. I hate you. I was so focused on the idea of being a perfect bride. I forgot what being a perfect sister even looked like. And in that moment, I realized something too. It wasn't just her who had grown. I had grown too. I had learned that it's okay to say no. It's okay to set boundaries even with people you love. It's okay to not be perfect. And that's the beauty of growth. It's messy, uncomfortable, and sometimes painful, but it's also real. We had both been through a whirlwind of emotions. And what we came out with was something stronger than any perfect image we had imagined. I smiled at her, feeling a mix of pride and relief. I've learned that too, I said, and I think that's what makes us stronger. It's not the perfect moments that define us, it's the imperfect ones. The ones that make us real. The ones that push us to grow. We spent the rest of that day talking and laughing. It's not just about the wedding or the fight, but about everything we had missed in each other. About how we used to spend hours talking when we were younger. About the silly things that used to make us laugh. About the times we were there for each other without even realizing how much it meant. We were rediscovering each other in a way we hadn't in years, and it felt right. And even though things weren't perfect after that conversation, they were better. We were better. We stopped trying to hold on to this illusion of what our relationship should look like, and instead we embraced what it was flawed, but beautiful in its own way. We began to understand each other in ways we never had before. One day, while we were doing something completely random shopping for a birthday gift for our moms, she turned to me and said, "Do you know, I think the wedding, the slap, everything was a wake-up call. It was the thing that made me stop and realize that I had been putting expectations on myself, on you, on this whole idea of family. And now I realize that the only expectation I should have is to be myself, and for you to be yourself, and for us to love each other through it all." And that was it. That was the moment I knew everything had shifted. It wasn't the grand gestures or the perfect apology. Wasn't even the way we had mended things. It was the fact that we both understood something that had been eluding us for so long. The key to any relationship isn't perfection, it's acceptance. It's knowing that you'll screw up, that the other person will screw up, but that you choose each other anyway. You choose to grow, to forgive, to fight for each other, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. It wasn't long. After that, maybe a few months, that I looked at my sister and realized just how far we'd come. We had gone from a place of anger and frustration to a place of deep understanding and compassion. Our relationship wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and that was enough. The hardest moments were the ones that shaped us. The slap, the fights, the silence, it all led to something better, something real. And as I look back now, I can honestly say that the wedding day wasn't the turning point for us. The turning point came afterward, in the moments when we decided to stop hiding from our pain and to confront it together. It came in the moments when we chose to love each other, not in spite of our flaws, but because of them. And so, years later, when we look back on that day, on everything that happened, we don't see it as a tragedy or a failure. We see it as the moment we finally learned what it meant to be sisters, not the perfect kind of sisters, but the real kind, the kind who love each other through the messy, imperfect moments of life. And that, to me, is what makes a family stronger. Over time, we began to make new memories together. It wasn't about pretending everything was perfect. We were still figuring things out, but this time we were doing it as equals, with no need for one person to carry the emotional weight for both of us. We had learned that it was okay to be vulnerable with each other, really vulnerable. To be honest about the things that scared us, the things that hurt us, and the things we didn't have answers to. There were days when we'd get into deep conversations about everything that had happened. We'd talk about the wedding day, the dress, the slap, the silence, and everything that had come before that. And those conversations were never easy. But they were necessary. Necessary because we both needed to talk about it, to really dig into the feelings we had buried for so long. It wasn't just about reliving the past, it was about understanding it and letting it go so we could move forward. One evening, we were sitting on my porch, sipping on some wine and looking at the stars, when she said something that stuck. "With me, I think the biggest thing I've learned is that you don't always have to be strong," she said. "I spent so much of my life thinking that if I didn't have it all figured out, I was failing. But now I know that strength isn't about having it all together. It's about being honest with yourself, about admitting when you don't know what to do next and still pushing through, even when it feels like you're falling apart." That hit me hard because I had always thought of her as the strong one, the one who always had everything together, who seemed unshakable. And hearing her admit that she didn't have all the answers made me realize something. We were both just figuring it out. We were both navigating the mess sciences of life, one step at a time, and that was okay. I wasn't failing by being vulnerable. She wasn't failing by not having everything under control. We were human, and that's what made us real. I sat there thinking about her words, and I couldn't help but smile. You know, I used to think I had to be strong all the time too, I said. But I've realized that being strong isn't about holding everything in. It's about allowing yourself to feel everything, the good, the bad, the ugly, and still moving forward. Even if you don't have all the answers. We both laughed, but it was a different kind of laugh. It wasn't the kind where we were. Hiding behind humor to avoid the real feelings, it was a laugh of understanding. We had finally stopped pretending. We'd finally started accepting that neither of us had it all figured out, and that was perfectly okay. As time went on, we started to see each other in new ways. It wasn't just her sister anymore. I was her partner in this thing called life. Okay, we supported each other in ways that were deeper than I could have imagined. Okay, and it wasn't just about being there for the big moments. It was about being there for the quiet, everyday moments, the ones that truly count. The phone calls in the middle of a rough day, the random texts asking how we were holding up, the shared jokes that only we understood. It was in those small moments that we realized how far we had come. One of the most profound things she said to me in those days was, we don't have to be perfect. We just have to be here for each other. And that's what matters. And I held on to those words because they became the foundation of our relationship moving forward. And just when I thought things couldn't get any better, something happened that proved to me that we had truly healed. It was around Christmas time, and my family decided to do a holiday dinner. It was going to be a low-key gathering, just the immediate family. But this time, it felt different. This time, it wasn't about the perfect meal or the perfect decorations. It was about just being together. That night, we sat around the table, laughing, eating, and talking about everything and nothing all at once. And as we all shared stories, she turned to me and said, "I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad we're here." I don't think I fully realized what I had until I almost lost it. I could feel my heart swell in that moment, because I knew exactly what she meant. I felt the same way. We had both come so close to losing each other, but somehow we had found a way back to each other. And this time, we weren't taking that for granted. We weren't letting go of what really mattered. As the night went on, I couldn't help but look around the table and feel a sense of peace, something I hadn't felt in a long time. There was no tension, no unresolved feelings, just love. And for the first time since that slap, I realized something profound. Our relationship had been tested, but it had been strengthened by the trials we faced. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. It was ours, and it was more than enough. Fast forward a few years later, and things had continued to grow in ways I never imagined. We had both gone through personal struggles, but we always came back to each other. We were there for each other in ways that went beyond what most people could understand. It wasn't about being the perfect sisters anymore. It was about being the real sisters we had always been deep down. It's the ones who could argue, laugh, cry, and still stand by each other no matter what. And every time I think about what happened, about the wedding, the dress, the slap, I no longer see it as a scar. I see it as a moment that changed us. It's a moment that forced us to grow, to see each other in ways we never had before. It wasn't about the conflict. It was about how we chose to move forward. I think one of the biggest things that changed in us both was how we viewed conflict. Before, we were both so afraid of it. I mean, who wants to fight with family? We both avoided confrontation because we were scared of what it might mean for our relationship. But after everything we went through, we realized that conflict isn't something to be feared. It's just a part of being human. And if we could fight through it, really fight for each other, then that would only make our bonds stronger. And trust me, we had our fair share of fights after that. But they were different. They weren't about petty things or misunderstandings. They were about real stuff. the kind of stuff that makes or breaks you. Like when I told her how I was feeling left out after she had her first child, or when she told me how she felt like she was always the one making sacrifices in our relationship. Those were hard conversations to have, but they were necessary. One night, we had this deep conversation about our childhood. You know, the kind of conversation you don't really have until you're older and wiser. She told me that she had always been afraid of losing me to someone or something else, that she had always felt like she had to hold on to me as tightly as she could, and I was shocked. I mean, I knew we were close, but I didn't realize how much my growing up and moving on had scared her. I never knew how to tell you this, she said, looking down at her hands. But I was always afraid of you leaving. I felt like if you grew up and had your own life, I'd lose my sister. And I had never heard her say that before. I had always thought that I was the one who had been afraid of losing her. But we were both just holding on in different ways, tight. And that made me realize something. It wasn't just about me growing up and leaving. It was about both of us learning to live our own lives while still being there for each other. We had spent so many years depending on each other to fill the gaps in our lives, but we hadn't really let each other grow. Not until that conversation. And it felt like a weight lifted off my chest. A weight I hadn't even known I was carrying. That night, we made a promise to each other that we would never let fear of change come between us again. We would allow ourselves to grow, to evolve, to live the lives we both wanted, but we would always have each other's backs. We would be there for each other, but not in the way we had been clinging to one another out of fear. We would be there in a way that celebrated our independence, our differences, and our growth. Because that's what real love looks like. It doesn't hold you back. It lets you go and cheers you on. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. We started to build more of our own lives. There was a shift in the way we interacted. It was subtle at first, but over time I began to feel like we were stronger for it. It wasn't about being the same person, it was about supporting each other in our individual journeys. Without resentment or expectation, we didn't lose each other. We found new ways to love. And that, in itself, was the real beauty of our relationship. We had gone through fire, through pain, through hurt and confusion, but we came out the other side with something better than before. We came out with a love that wasn't dependent on the other person to fill something missing. We came out with a love that was complete because it was rooted in trust, respect, and understanding. Eventually, we started talking more about the future. We laughed about how silly it had all been, about how we had let one moment, a single, explosive moment, nearly ruin everything. We both agreed that we never wanted to go back to that place, that we would never let something as trivial as a dress or a disagreement tear us apart again. It was clear now that the slap wasn't the end of our story, it was just the beginning. It was the point where we finally understood what it meant to truly see each other. And it was the start of a new chapter in our relationship, one where we would no longer hide from each other, but instead embrace the full depth of who we were, together and apart. And you know what? As we continued on, we discovered something truly incredible. The more we gave each other the freedom to be who we were, the closer we became. The more we let go of the expectations of who we thought we should be, the more we understood each other. It wasn't just about family anymore, it was about respect for each other's growth, boundaries, and choices. And with that respect came the deepest love we had ever known. We had finally learned what it meant to be sisters, not the kind that try to control each other, not the kind that demand perfection, but the kind that accept each other's flaws and love each other through them. We had become a living example that, yes, even the hardest moments in life can bring about the most profound change. Even the worst pain can lead to the most beautiful growth. At some point, the idea of perfection faded into the background. We had both learned that perfection was overrated anyway. What mattered now was realness, the kind of raw, untidy, messy realness that comes when you accept each other's humanity. It wasn't about having it all together, about living up to some impossible standard of what a perfect family should. Looked like it was about loving each other despite our imperfections and sometimes even because of them. We had our ups and downs, sure. There were days when we'd slip back into old habits, when the tension would reappear. But now, instead of letting it consume us, we knew how to handle it. We talked about it. We didn't hide behind the walls we had built over the years. And when we felt ourselves drifting, we made a conscious effort to pull each other back in. Not with grand gestures, but with little acts of love. Little moments that showed we were still there, still fighting for each other. One thing that really stood out during these moments of growth was our ability to be vulnerable with one another. There were no more walls between us. No more pretending to be the strong one, or the perfect one, or the one with it all figured out. We both admitted that we didn't have the answers to everything, but that was okay. The pressure to be perfect was gone. And what replaced it was something much stronger, an unspoken trust that no matter what happened, we would always show up for each other. It wasn't just about talking about the hard things anymore. It was about being present for each other, even in the silent moments. Like when she had her second child and I was there holding her hand through the labor. I didn't have the perfect words to say, but I didn't need them. Just being there, being present, was enough. And the look on her face when she turned to Mia and whispered, "Thank you," told me everything I needed to know. It wasn't about the grand gestures. It was about being there. And when I went through a tough breakup a year later, she was there for me in the same quiet, unwavering way. She didn't try to fix it, didn't give me a bunch of advice that I didn't ask for. She just sat with me. She held me when I cried, and in those moments, I realized that this was what real support felt like. It was no longer about being perfect for each other. It was about being there, flaws and all, without judgment. We had both grown so much. But the real transformation came when we realized that we weren't just sisters anymore. We were partners in life. We had learned to be equals, to support each other without expectation, to give each other the space to grow and be ourselves. We had created a safe space for each other, space where we didn't have to pretend, where we could be vulnerable and still know that we were loved. That was the true beauty of our relationship, and we didn't take it for granted anymore. Was one night, a few years later, we sat down together and talked about everything that had happened about the wedding. The fight, the slap, and everything we'd learned since. We laughed, we cried, we held nothing back. And in that moment, I felt this deep sense of gratitude. Not for the wedding or the perfect moments, but for the fact that we had survived it all. We had weathered the storm together and come out stronger. And now we could finally see the bigger picture. We had found each other again in the truest sense of the word. "You know," she said, as we sat there on the couch, "I don't think I could ever have learned to love you more than I do. Now, after everything, after all the hurt and the pain, I love you more than I ever thought possible." And that hit me like a ton of bricks. Because I felt the same way. I had spent so many years thinking that I needed to protect myself, that I needed to hold my ground, that I needed to be perfect. But in doing that, I had almost missed out on the greatest gift I could ever have, a real relationship with my sister, one built on understanding, on forgiveness, on growth, not on perfection, just on us. "I love you too," I said, choking back tears. "And I think this is the best version of us yet. We're not perfect, but we're real, and that's what makes us stronger." And it was true. We were no longer trying to live up to some fairy tale version of what sisterhood was supposed to look like. We had stopped trying to be perfect, and instead, we had learned how to just be, to just live. To love each other for who we weren't, who we thought we should be. Looking back, I can see now that everything we went through, tension, the fights, the slap, was a necessary part of our journey. It taught us about boundaries, about love, about forgiveness. But most importantly, it taught us about the beauty of imperfection. We had learned to love each other not in spite of our flaws, but because of them. And that to me is what makes a relationship real. As we sat there laughing and crying and talking about all we'd been through, I realized something. This messy, imperfect, beautiful journey we had been on was our story, and it was more than enough. And that's what I've learned. Love isn't about perfection. It's about choosing each other every single day. It's about showing up even when it's hard. It's about forgiving, learning, and growing together. And that's exactly what we've done, and I wouldn't change a single thing. As we continued on this journey together, started to realize something profound. We weren't just healing from one moment. We were healing from a lifetime of unspoken expectations, buried emotions, and a fear of not being enough. The wedding, the slap, the argument wasn't just about those events. It was about everything that had been left unsaid between us for so long. The things we didn't talk about, the feelings we buried because we were too scared to confront them. And once we started digging, once we started confronting those truths, we found a new kind of connection, a deeper, more honest connection. We weren't just sisters anymore. We were partners in growth. We weren't afraid to call each other out when we needed it, but we also weren't afraid to show up for each other when it mattered. Let me tell you, showing up for someone in the hardest moments, that's when you really learn what your relationship is made of. It's easy to love someone when everything's going smoothly, when life is calm and predictable. But when life gets messy, when things fall apart, that's when you find out if you really have a foundation to stand on. I think what surprised me the most was how much we had changed. I had spent so many years believing that we were always supposed to be the same, to think the same, to have the same goals and dreams. But over time, I learned that we didn't have to be the same. We could have our own paths, our own identities, our own dreams, and still be there for each other in a way that felt right for both of us. We had come so far, and yet I knew that we still had so much to learn from each other. Life was always going to throw us curveballs. There would be challenges, both big and small. But now I understood something important. We were never going to face those challenges alone. No matter what happened, we had each other. One of the most powerful moments came when we were at a family reunion, years after everything had happened. We were sitting at a table with relatives, laughing and joking about the past. When one of our cousins asked about the wedding, without skipping a beat, my sister turned to them and said, "Honestly, the wedding wasn't perfect. But the real story wasn't about the dress or the party or the perfect image I had in my head. The real story was about what happened after. It was about how my sister and I got through the hard stuff, how we learned to love each other in the mess, and how we came out of it stronger than we'd ever been before." And in that moment, I felt something shift. It was like the weight of everything had finally been lifted. We had both accepted that life wasn't perfect, but the fact that we were still standing side by side, still growing together, still loving each other, that was what mattered. And I could see it in her eyes. She was proud of us. We had come so far, and so had I. That night, after the reunion, we stayed up late talking, as we always did. But this time, the conversation was different. It wasn't about past mistakes or regrets. It wasn't about the slap or the dress. It was about our future. It was about the things we wanted to accomplish, the dreams we hadn't even shared with each other yet. We talked about everything, about travel, about our careers, about relationships, and we didn't hold anything back. There was a freedom in that conversation that I hadn't felt before. A freedom that came from knowing that we trusted each other with our deepest fears, hopes, and dreams. It was one of the most peaceful nights we'd had in years. No drama, no tension. It's just us, together as we should have been all along. As we sat there in the quiet, I thought about how much we had both changed, how much we had both grown. And I realized something important. Relationships aren't built on perfect moments. They're built on real moments, the ones where you let go of your expectations and just be, where you let the other person in, even when you're scared of what might happen. It's about embracing the messy parts of life and realizing that, in the end, those messy parts are what make you who you are. They make you stronger. They make you real. You know, I said, breaking the silence, I never thought we'd get here after everything. I didn't think we'd make it through. But now, no. Now I know that we were always meant to be sisters, no matter how messy things got. And that's enough. She smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes, and nodded. I'm so glad we didn't give up on each other, she said quietly. We've been through so much, but I think this is the best version of us. And in that moment, I couldn't agree more. It wasn't about the perfect moments, the perfect wedding, or the perfect image. It was about the journey, the one we had taken together, the one that had shaped us into the people we were today. It had been a painful journey at times, but it had also been a beautiful one. We had learned how to love each other through our flaws, our mistakes, and our imperfections. And that was the kind of love I would always treasure. Looking back on everything now, I don't regret a single moment. Not the fights, not the slap, not the misunderstandings. Because all of those moments were the ones that led us here. They were the moments that made us real, that made us who we are. And I wouldn't trade that for anything. Years passed, and with each year, I could see more and more how far we'd come. Life was still challenging, as it always is, but we had this unspoken strength between us that I knew we'd build through everything we'd been through. It was like we were no longer walking this journey with heavy hearts, weighed down by past mistakes. Instead, we were walking side by side, supporting each other in a way that was rooted in deep understanding and trust. And in those moments, I realized that everything we'd been through was worth it because it brought us to where we are now. I wouldn't change a thing. And so, here we are, years down the road from that difficult time. If you had told me back then that we would come out of it stronger, I would have been skeptical. But now, looking back, I realize how much we've both grown, how much we've both changed for the better. The wedding wasn't perfect. The slap wasn't something I'll ever forget. But it led us to this unbreakable bond that goes deeper than I ever imagined. What I've learned through all of this is that love isn't always about the happy moments or the perfect memories. It's about facing the hard times, about standing side by side when things get tough, and about learning how to love each other. Not in spite of our flaws, but because of them. People often talk about how relationships should be easy, how family should always get along without issues, but that's not real. Real relationships are messy. They're complicated. They test you, and sometimes they break you. But when you pick up the pieces and come back together, that's when you realize just how strong the bond really is. Through every challenge, every misunderstanding, every tear, we found our way back to each other, and that's what matters the most. We didn't just survive, we thrived. Not because we were perfect, but because we were willing to fight for each other, to be vulnerable, to forgive, and to love deeper than we ever had. Before I think about how far we've come, how much we've learned, and I can't help but feel this overwhelming sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the hard times, for the growth, for the healing, and gratitude for the sister who will always be there, no matter what life throws our way. In the end, it wasn't the wedding, the dress, or the slap that defined us. It was everything. That came after. It was the way we learned to face our flaws, to let go of the need for perfection, and to embrace each other as we are. That's the story I'll always remember, the story of two sisters who fought, who hurt, but who ultimately found their way back to each other, stronger than before. And that's the kind of love that lasts, the kind that doesn't need perfection, but just a willingness to be real. I wouldn't change a thing about it.